So the other day I went ahead and changed my aquarium substrate from all black substrate to a gold substrate or a sandy colored substrate. I've had this substrate in the past. I've had this with my scone and my 3 Delhaizees and my Hugetta Gar. But I decided to change up my substrate just because I was getting tired of the all black. And with the lighter substrate, I'll be able to see all my fish since all my side panels are pretty much covered in black. It gives the aquarium a different look, makes it look a lot brighter, and it also changes the look of my bikers. Bikers are the type of fish that change color depending on the shade of the substrate. So if you have a dark substrate, they'll get really, really dark. But if you have a light substrate, they'll get light. With the substrate, you can actually see the patterns of the fish. When I had the black substrate, it was pretty much jet black. And it looked like a really dark dell. But now you can see the lapse patterns and it looks a lot nicer with this lighter substrate. So from the looks of it, the only fish that's affected by my substrate that drastically changed was my bikers. But that's from what I can see. From what I've read on the previous substrate that I've had, there's a lot of issues. So the previous substrate I was using was Carib's Tahitian Moon Sand, which is displayed right here. This sand gained its popularity from it not losing its color. Some aquarium substrate or sand in particular that's out there, as you're doing water changes, the color fades away and becomes gray. But this sand is known for staying completely black the whole time. And this sand is particularly fine. The grains in the sand is very small, so earth eaters and fish that dig into the substrate won't have any issues going through and coming back out. I've had peacock eels in the past. They've dug into the substrate, dug back out, and it didn't irritate them at all. On the cover of the sand, pretty much the package, you'll see on the bottom left corner that it says free biomagnet clarifier inside. So this is the reason why I'm covering this specific brand and this specific substrate made by Carib. When you Google search Tahitian Moon Sand and scroll down just a little bit, you'll start to see topics like this. A warning about Tahitian Moon Sand, sand is magnetic, gross, Carib Tahitian Moon Sand, heavy toxic metals, and also suggestions on Tahitian Moon Sand killing fish, killing shrimp. So let's go ahead and click on that. Now see, I clicked on that and all kinds of topics come up on entire fish tanks dropping dead, Tahitian Moon Sand equals dead water, Tahitian Moon Sand killing my fish. Along with all the topics here, Carib actually discontinued the product as well. So you won't be able to find this on Amazon, you won't be able to find this in your retail box stores. It could be that there's metal inside the substrate. Well, there is metal inside the substrate and I'll prove it to you. So I did a test the other day with the MagFloat and my substrate. I was going to do it again for you guys with my MagFloat right here, but my substrate is a little damp. So the test I did a couple days ago, the substrate was dry and I used a smaller MagFloat. What I did was I ran my MagFloat across the surface of the dry substrate, and as you can see, it picked up substrate on the 2 magnet points that are on that MagFloat. So what does this mean exactly? There's metal inside your substrate and it's at least something that's attracted to magnets. A lot of people might think it's not good, but some people might think it's harmless, right? Me, for example, I think this substrate is harmless to fish because I had this substrate in my aquarium for an extensive amount of time. Along with that, I've actually bred crystal red shrimp and cherry red shrimp in the same exact substrate. I've bred them all in aquariums that had Tahitian Moon Sand inside. You may or may not know, but shrimps are really sensitive to metals in your aquarium or in your water or whatever. Is this sand toxic? No, I don't think so. I've had success with it with fish. I've had success with it with shrimp. So if you have Tahitian Moon Sand in your aquarium, don't freak out when you see this. What I think it might have been is there was a line of Carib substrate that had actual water inside. It kind of promoted live bacteria in the substrate already. Pretty much ready for an aquarium that's brand new. It doesn't have enough beneficial bacteria and makes it a lot easier for the aquarists to start off their tank with beneficial bacteria. So I think it was something along those lines that pretty much messed it up for that specific brand and that specific line of substrate. But I bought and used a lot of Tahitian moon sand that was dry, and it had no issues on my fish whatsoever. At least I don't think so, I can't see it. And on top of the shrimps, snails is another creature that's really sensitive to metals in the water, especially in the substrate since they're digging all over it. And as you can see, there's snails all over my aquarium. Even with traps, even with manually taking them out, they're breeding well. So technically, I think the metals that's inside that specific substrate isn't toxic for your fish. I love the substrate. It worked out really well. I just wanted a little bit of change in the aquarium. Getting all mean for it. I'm just explaining my experience that I had with the Tahitian moon sand. I've kept a lot of sensitive fish when it comes to water parameters and water conditioner, just like Pyara, and I haven't had issues with them whatsoever. So I know it's not toxic to my fish. I could have kept it in my aquarium for an extended amount of time. But the reason why I took out that substrate is because I have a lot of pumps in this aquarium. I have a water pump for my main aquarium that pumps water into my sump, and I have another water pump that's actually in my filter, and that pumps water to my pothos. With all these motors pumping in water in and out, I don't want any chance of the substrate getting stuck onto the motors of these water pumps. And it will pretty much ruin the water pump for my whole system here. Although it is unlikely that my fish would be able to kick the sand that's all the way down here, all the way to the top, that's just a chance that I'm not willing to take. And I found substrate that's in my sump from I don't know where. I had an idea that maybe it was my air stone that was kicking up substrate into the air that flows across the surface of the aquarium, gets sucked in through the bulkhead, and back out into my filter, which ended up in my sump. That substrate that ended up in my sump can pretty much ruin my water pump, so I'd rather just deal with it now and change the substrate out and not have to worry about it later. And another reason why I think it's good that I switched out the substrate is because I have an acrylic aquarium. I have an acrylic aquarium that's prone to scratches and whatnot, and at least I don't know if I did this before, but I do tend to get the magnet pretty low, so I'm not too sure if the substrate got stuck onto the magnet before or not. There is some scratches on this aquarium, but I don't want to cause any more. With the Tahitian moon sand gone, I don't have to worry about the substrate getting stuck on the magnets. And as I'm wiping and cleaning the glass, I don't have to worry about the substrate scratching my aquarium. But if you have a glass aquarium, you don't have to worry about that because glass doesn't really scratch as easily as acrylic. So if you're using Tahitian moon sand in a Petco 10-gallon glass aquarium, I wouldn't really worry about it because glass is not really going to scratch like acrylic does. So that was my take on the Tahitian Carib Sea black moon sand. It was actually one of my favorite substrates that I've ever used in my aquariums just because it stays jet black, the substrate grain is really fine, and it actually leaves a nice shine on the bottom. I'm not too sure if it's like the metals in the substrate, but it actually had a little bling factor to it. So I enjoyed that substrate. Now that I'm using this, it looks a lot more natural to me, and I think my fish look a lot better on this lighter surface. The brand of this substrate is actually Carib Sea again, but this time this one is called Sunset. It's a lightish gold color, kind of sandy, and it still retains that really fine grain. Although it is expensive, I do think it's worth it just because the texture of the substrate is really fine, and I think it looks really clean when the substrate surface is spotless. But I just wanted to go over my experience with Tahitian moon sand, the toxic sand that's killing fish. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for the next one, and peace guys.